So now we want to animate our flour sack jumping from a great height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a polygon primitive. So create cube, and I'm going to go into the channel box. I'm going to make that cube much bigger, and let's make it much bigger. Let's try 50. You'll see that the flour sack is actually modeled very large. So we have to model our cube rather big. Now I'm going to scale it, move it down, and then move it in so it looks like a wall. And okay, so now we've got a sort of a brick wall for the flour sack to jump off. Maybe that's too high, it doesn't need to be that high. You don't want to kill the poor thing. Actually a little bit higher. There we go. That'll do. Okay, so we've got a little wall, and if you want you can assign it a little color. Well, let's go to Window, Outliner, P-Cube1, let's call it Wall, and let's right click on it, assign it a material. Let's assign it a Lambert. So once that's done, we want to go ahead and create a ground plane. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Plane, and I'm going to move that down, and now scale it up so we get a nice big plane, something like that. And I'm not going to worry too much about the... There we go, something like that. So now we've got a surface for our for our flour sack to jump on, and then actually we should then also rename that in the outliner. Let's call that ground plane, and if we like, we can assign some simple textures to these things. So we could assign a Lambert to the actually we've already done that, sorry. So let's go back to, whoops, we're in component mode. Let me go back to object mode. So there's our Lambert for the wall. So we can go into color and maybe give it a kind of biscuity texture, something like that. And we could go ahead and right click on the ground and then assign the same material to that. So if I go down to, actually you can't see this because it's not on the screen, but if I go, here we go, if I go assign existing material Lambert 2, then that should give us the same ground plane, or the same color for both. Anyway, we'd have to light that to make it look pretty. But then if I go into, let me double click on Lambert 2 up here in the attribute editor. Sorry, we'll just rename it here, and I'm going to call that wall material, and hit enter. So now it's actually got its own name. And now we are ready to start to animate. Now, one thing that we want to do before we go any further is we should actually, well, let's first of all, let's create a layer for our background. So let's go into the layer editor, create an empty layer, and let's call that BG save, and go add selected objects, and now we can turn the layer editor off whenever we want. So let's go ahead and turn it off for now, and let's zoom in on the flower. And what we want to do here is to actually create a control. I'm going to shift select these three controls here, because what we want is to create a kind of multi-control where we've got the actually I don't know, I think that's wrong, not the hips. What we want is a control that moves the body and also the legs with it. So what I want to do is select right leg, body, and left leg. I'm holding down the shift key there to select all three of them. And then I'm going to drag select all of that and middle mouse drag it into the shelf. Go to the pointy down arrow, go to the shelf editor, and I'm going to call that last control. I'm going to call that multi, because that is a multi tab, which hopefully we can now use basically as a kind of poor man's body control. And we can move everything around without having to animate the world control. So that's quite a handy little control to create by combining those three controls there. So now that we've got that done, I'm going to turn the background back on, and I'm now going to create a camera. You always want to animate to the camera view, so the next thing to do is create a camera. So let's go create create cameras camera, go to panels, look through selected, and pull out here, and then go to set up the camera so that we have a view that we like. Now he's going to be leaping up in the air, so we want to create a camera that gives us everything in the shot, or rather so that we can see everything. We may have to extend this set, by the way, but for now we'll leave it the way it is. And let's go ahead and go into the outliner. We'll call that shot camera or shot cam. Minimize that, and go ahead and then let's lock off the values. So let's go to lock selected. So now we have a camera. We've got our a simple set. We've got our control set up. The last thing to do is to go ahead and look at the thumbnails. And here's the thumbnails that come with the shot. So you can see here that frame 1, the flour sack is in an anticipation position. Then it's going to compress at frame 9, lift off at 13, 17, 21, splat at 25, 29, 33, 37, and slow into 49 at the end. Now this is just rough timing. You can feel free to change it, but I would suggest following this pretty closely for your first blocking, because the thumbnails have been pretty carefully thought through. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timeline to frame 49, because that's our end position. So we're going to start at frame 1 and end at frame 49. That seems about right. And then before I actually do any animation, I'm going to go ahead and save this. So File, Save Scene As, Flour Sack Jump, version 3. And then in the next video, we'll go ahead and do some actual animation.